Welcome to the DLAI Fintech Conclave 2023 podcast series brought to you by the Digital Lenders Association of India and India Fintech Diaries. Financial inclusion is an important area that gains increasing importance as India aims to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025. Financial inclusion actually spans several facets that include rural-urban divides, gender divides, and geographical divides. To discuss how fintech can serve the next 100 million, we're joined by two special guests on the show. Our first guest, Sucharita Mukherhjee, is very passionate about access to financial services for all, and she believes in finance for freedom. She is the co-founder of Kaleidofin, a fintech platform that provides intuitive and tailored financial solutions to the underbanked customers. Prior to this, she co-founded the IFMR Group and was most recently the group CEO of IFMR Holdings. Sucharita was awarded the Women Leader in Fintech in 2018 by India Fintech Awards for her pioneering work at Kaleidofin. Prior to move to India, Sucharita was an investment bank at Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank in London. Our second guest, Manish Lunia, is a career financial services professional with 20 plus years of experience and has co-founded Flexiloans, one of India's leading embedded ecosystem lenders for MSME loans. At Flexiloans, Manish heads the risk and credit, co-lending and strategic partnerships and alliances and collection and legal functions. Before he co-founded Flexiloans in 2016, he spearheaded multiple M&A deals at Aditya Birla Group and was part of the CEO's office at Aditya Birla Financial Services in their formative years. He was the Circle Finance head for Tata Teleservices Limited in Gujarat, leading finance for the fast-growing telecom player. Manish is also part of the executive committee of DLAI, spearheading various policies that will help in the growth of the industry. And I'm your host, Elroy Sarao, and this is India Fintech Diaries. Welcome back to India Fintech Diaries, the show where we discuss all things Indian fintech. What's the topic for discussion today, Hemant?
Elroy, continuing our series with the Digital Lenders Association of India for the DLAI Fintech Conclave 2023. Today we touch on the topic of financial inclusion, how gender plays an important role and how digital lending can make a difference for the next 100 million customers. To discuss this, we have with us today Sucharita Mukherhjee, co-founder and CEO, Kaleidofin. Welcome to India Fintech Diaries, Sucharita.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
And also joining us today is Manish Lunia, co-founder of Flexiloans. Welcome to India Fintech Diaries, Manish.
Thank you, Elroy. Thank you, Hemant, for having me here.
As per RBI statistics, we have approximately 950 million debit cards today in India. That kind of represent over an 80% coverage of the adult population of India. While as a statistic, this represents a lot of progress done in the last decade as far as financial inclusion is concerned, we still think there's a lot that is still missing. Sucharita, financial inclusion has been a topic that's been very close to you and is reflected in your work at Kaleidofin as well. Talk to us about some of the issues you see with respect to underbanking and financial inclusion, especially in the informal sector.
Sure, absolutely. Just talking about first the areas where we have made rapid progress. I think one of the places is just ownership of bank accounts. And the Jandhan Yojana definitely did give a fillip to that. We saw that the World Bank Fintechs actually released its report recently, and that shows that account ownership has gone from 35% to about 78%. What is even more exciting is that the gender divide in account ownership has been completely eliminated. So I think that's the good news. The stuff, which is quite a bit, which we still have to work on, is the use of that bank account, right? A bank account is as useful as it is when you actually save with it, you actually borrow from it, you transact through it. A bank account which is unused or inactive doesn't really serve much purpose. And we have to ask the question why the inactive accounts are so high. And what's extremely concerning is that there is actually a deep gender divide here, where the levels of account inactivity for women versus men is almost double. So that's something I think we have to work a lot on. Other, issue is really, we've had this wonderful India stack with, UPI doing fantastic numbers. But on the other hand, when you look a little bit deeper, again, from an inclusion lens and from a gender lens perspective, you'll find that perhaps there are something like 150 to 200 million unique UPI users. Just to put it into perspective, India has 950 million adults. So we do have still a lot of ground to cover. And I'm going to stop here with the statistics, but one of the reasons why this happens is because a lot of the bank accounts are which are owned by informal sector customers working with little to no documentation or rights, which is, by the way, 90% of India today. They all have accounts which are just filled with all manners of charges, which are extremely difficult to use. And honestly, it's scary for customers in the informal customer segment to digitalize. So there are charges for things like SMSs, there are charges for bounces, there are charges for doing more than 5 digital transactions. Honestly, any way you move, if you keep balances of less than 25, 30,000 in your bank account, the bank account is a landmine for most customers, and that's something we have to solve. For the other big issue is, of course, just more investment in local language as well as assistance to make these accounts just much more accessible.
On the other side of the spectrum, 131 million or 41% of formal MSMEs in developing countries have unmet financing needs. For India, this represents a INR 20 to 25 trillion credit gap as per the UK Sinha Committee report of 2019. Since then, the gap would only have increased. Manish, talk to us about some of the issues and challenges that MSMEs face in accessing credit and being included in the formal finance net.
So I think, Hemant, what happens is exactly the same piece that Sucharita mentioned in terms of statistics. We all know that there are 13 million MSMEs now. With the new definition, even the retailers are now classified under the MSME segment. But there are only one plus crore Udyam registered MSMEs. There are only 1 odd crores GST registered MSMEs. So what about the balance 12 crores? There's nothing actually that shows that they are MSMEs, right? These are the mom and pop stores who are actually acting, who may have bank accounts with the 90 crore bank account that are there, but they have little use in accessing credit because they don't even meet the basic KYC requirement that the RBI wants for a business to be lent. And a rapid progress needs to happen in these spaces if these guys have to really come to the fore. At the same time, what we've seen is over the last 6 years since we started Flexiloans, when we started, only about 20 odd crore Indians had a credit score. Today, it's about 60 crore Indians having a credit score. So there's a massive set of individuals in India who are getting even a small loan or an excess, which is substantially happening at the PL side of it. We've all heard about the cards and small loans that are there. So people can take loans, availability is there, they are repaying loans, and thus they're actively there, not defaulting. But the fact that the MSME's assessment of them having a bankable and a KYCable documentation set is something that's continuing to deter them to kind of access formal sector credit right now.
And Manish, even when we talk about MSMEs, MSME is a big set, right? There is a large group for India, especially, which is the farming community, which has its own set of problems or specific nuances when it comes to making credit accessible for them. So, can you speak a bit about that segment as well?
So the farming community isn't a part of the MSME segment any which ways, Hemant, right now. I think the people who are actually the vegetable vendors, etc., they would form under the retailer segment. Again, like you said, how do you give them access? So microfinance, the birth of microfinance is only that reason that they can actually go to an individual, give them personal finance. And that's why India today continues to kind of scale up on the microfinance sector. And I think Sucharita has already worked on the segment substantially deep down the line. But when we work on the digitization path and we reach out to these customers can go up to a level 1 of kind of applying to us. But when it comes to level 2, the vernacularization, the lack of documentation does not take them to level 2 of doing documentation or passing the credit funnels. Right. So they continue to stay excluded in a sense just because while the information has reached them, they can't process it well, or they do not have documentation to process it well. Right.
Understood. Understood. And Manish, it is also estimated that in developing countries, women-owned businesses comprise 23% of MSMEs and account for 32% of the MSME finance gap. What are some of the challenges that women-owned businesses and or entrepreneurs face when accessing finance, which is unique?
So one thing that's there in India is that when there's a women there's women who are involved in businesses, I think the lenders find a lot of comfort from a multiple set of factors. And women are much more serious about making payments; they're not casual. Secondly, women are considered to be much more prestigious in the family. In case of a litigation against women, everybody would stand up and want to close the litigation at the first instance. Any women-led business or women coming on the loan is always a preferred option for most lenders in the country, at least that we have seen. However, the flip side is this: of the 100 applications that we get from women applicants, 80 of them, the women are only a front and a name for men who are running the business. It's either out of sentimental value or out of taxation value, or the
Hmm.
fact that the men actually have defaulted on their loans or don't have a good track record in the past. The effective women population is only 20% of the 25%, in our opinion, who are running businesses. Having said that, lastly, just because of the first two components of women entrepreneurs who are coming on the loan track, because just women are there on the loan track, those customers with women plus men combination or women only combination perform better in our records versus only men or men led record.
Interesting, Manish. Sucharita, I also want to get your views on the same topic as well.
Yes, yes. Yeah, actually, at Kaleidofin, 98% of our customers are women. And, about 60% of the women actually run what we call nano businesses,
Right?
typically employing, either themselves or up to five people. So, really tiny enterprises. And, I do think completely agree with what Manish says on this end. But I do think that the design itself of financial services has to be, remarkably different, given women have a few different things that are quite unique to them, some of which are true across the country, some of which are not. One is just the aspect of mobility. Just men in India are way more mobile than women. This is more true in the north of the country than the south of the country. So obviously there are
Right.
differences, but in some sense, therefore, the involvement of community agents, the expectation of assistance at the doorstep, the local language service, all of these have to be exceptionally strong. The other unique thing that we found when we launched Kaleidofin is we actually launched with a very holistic financial solution which included both savings as well as credit. And in some sense, customers could start either from savings journey or from the credit journey, depending on which point in the cycle they were in. And we found that, especially on the savings side, women were sort of like the owner of the household goals. So let's say, for example, I'm a woman, I want to send my daughter to medical college and I want her to become a doctor. That is my responsibility largely. I'm motivated, I do everything to make that happen. I make sure that I have the 200,000 in 5 years when I need it. And we found that women are just way, way more motivated and disciplined about household goals. And that's when we pivoted to women really being a huge business positive strategy because, we just found that the uptake was much higher. And in some sense, we zeroed in on that and looked at, okay, what do women need when they are saving with us and borrowing with us as well for their small businesses. And one of the features or requests that came out was confidentiality of financial transactions. Now, typically you'll find, in a typical, and I am typifying here,
Right.
informal sector household is that the man or, has the smartphone. Very often the woman doesn't. And what we thought earlier was that, okay, we will just use the family smartphone for adopting the customer. But Very soon it became very apparent that that was completely out of question, and a lot of women said that I do not want my husband to know about my savings, and this is something that I would like to keep extremely confidential. If there is a backup number, please take my friend, my neighbor's number, and I am not comfortable accessing this from my husband's phone. Right. So now, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is when the customer tells you this, you got to solve for it, right? And you got to respect it. So we actually developed those features which let women or men, for that matter, keep
Right.
their financial transactions confidential from their family members. And we were careful to make sure that the backup numbers were not the spouse's numbers if they did not wish to. The other thing we did was that we at Kaleidofin, we invested in an assisted app architecture as well as a direct to customer app architecture right from the beginning, just recognizing the need for assistance and the fact that onboarding is a huge pain point. KYC and payment flows are not easy for customers to navigate on their own. And therefore, we built a network of community agents who could help our women customers onboard themselves. And sometimes these are, the super users as well among the women customers. But, that's the kind of investment that's required to really accelerate digitalization as well as, just the use of fintech among women.
Yeah. And so, Charita, I think sometimes we tiptoe around topics such as these, but in my conversation with a rural bank also, it clearly came out, especially on the nano side of the business where women are running very, very small businesses. A lot of time it is also about saving the money from getting in hands of their husbands or the men in the family, because sometimes a lot of these men are not employed or sometimes employed, sometimes unemployed, and the money is not put to the right use for the family. So that becomes critical and important for them to keep that money safe so that it's used for the family and not for some other purposes.
Correct, correct, correct. That is very much the motivation,
Exactly.
to
Mhm.
just make sure that the household goals are protected. I think that's the main concern.
Absolutely. Manish, you have been supporting MSMEs for a very long time and you have been solving a lot of these challenges that MSMEs face. So can you help us understand some of the practical ways in which you at your firm and of course firms such as yours and fintechs are addressing these problems for MSMEs and supporting financial inclusion?
Sure. I think the first phase of any process where the reach is so small is to kind of expand your reach to let people know that funding exists and the funding can come within a few days. So there are a lot of, and we use the word deserving, underserved in the country. So today, each month, Flexiloans gets about 1.5 to 2 lakh applications. About 10 lakh people come to a website. An app probably doesn't do the Reiki, but about 1.5 lakh people apply on the website, give enough information to kind of pull out the CIBIL, etc., and assess them. These comes from about 6,500 plus towns and cities, right? So
Right.
at all points in time, we write blog, write. We've also initiated now vernacular content, which is very important to realize that in various parts of the country, we south, east, etc., people are not so comfortable with English, or if even if they're comfortable, I think they're addressing. I mean, when you go to tier three, tier four towns, about 60% of our loans are in tier three and four towns. There, the better mode of communication and understanding stuff is vernacular. And also important to know, there is a taboo in India about loans, right? How do you kind of take the loan taboo out and give people options to say, hey, look, this is the option to kind of pre-close it. You will not, other family members may not know it. So in the past, people would kind of go and visit their people, take references and make reference calls. So while we collect references, we may not call those references, and so on and so forth. So the idea is first provide information, remove the taboo, to kind of make the entire process and journey very seamless. Erstwhile, if an MSME wanted a loan, they would have collect the entire documentation. If they are now taking a loan in January, they had to audit the financials, go to the CA. It was a very cumbersome process. Also, letting the world know, the family
Mhm.
members, the CAs, and others know all these things.
Right.
Today, all they need to do is kind of, because of the digital journeys and the rails that India has, they all need to kind of come to the DigiLocker access, probably provide an account aggregator access, which is now about 40% of our total consumption of bank accounts, And in the next 24 hours, actually real time, but typically on a firmed offer in the next 24 hours, they get an offer wherever in the country they are. So again, providing us, and these could be small loans. When we are talking of MSMEs of 13.5 crore, about 90% of them have a turnover of less than 1.5 2 crores as per the OMDR report, right? So these customers don't need a large loan, but they want to start it because they are just the evolved set of microfinance customers. They now do about business of 2 3 lakh rupees, and they would want a 3 4 lakh rupees loan either to meet their working capital gap or to
Mhm.
meet a contingency which has happened now, but it's only the business that can fulfill that payment later in life. So for salaried individuals, if they wanted to do a holiday or a marriage, they would take a loan basis the salary, future salary or potential. But a business guy or an MSME wants the same loan for similar purposes. He has none. There's only working
Mhm.
capital available. So what he gets is term loans from players like us because there's a future potential earnability from the same business. I think we assess them very holistically with multiple options around, and a large section of this which are deserving get approved now. The point is, we know that we still are only meeting 5% of the demand that we get. So miles to go before we kind of reach to the last mile. But information availability, process simplicity, and now the various initiatives that are doing on saying how do we simplify KYC, how do we create assisted videos for them to fulfill the entire process end to end. Today, people get stuck. What is year of incorporation means what, or vintage
Mhm.
means what, right? These are standard words that you use. We're going to figure out that people get stuck at these places and say, business कितने साल से है, or how many years have you been in business with, versus writing vintage or incorporation. So we're going to that last mile such that people understand and the entire journey is simple. So far, we have given loans to about 60,000 plus MSMEs in the country. As I said, about 60% of them in tier 3 and 4 towns, and we believe the fairly and sub 10 lakh rupees is 90% of the loans. So we're doing our bit, but the ambitions are huge and the potential is huge.
Actually, that brings me to the next question for both of you. What are the challenges that you have faced while actually trying to widen the net of financial inclusion, both from an business as well as an consumer standpoint? And maybe, Sucharita, you could go first from the consumer standpoint.
Sure, sure. So, one of the challenges we faced when we were designing our financial solutions, both on the
Right,
savings and credit side, was that we realized that while every customer actually had a bank account, the quality of this bank account was actually quite terrible. And therefore, when you add a good product on a terrible bank account, the experience is still terrible, right? For
right,
example, let's say, like in Manish's case, there is a loan product, and most MSMEs are in the informal sector. They have volatile income, and you miss your payment, right, for a month.
right,
The bank, who is actually not taking credit risk at all, charges something like 350 to 400 rupees for that bounce on the payment. And it's completely disproportionate, right? And if anything, let's say Flexiloans or Manish was taking credit risk, if anything, a penalty should be charged by Flexiloans, but the bank in the middle is creating a lot of friction. Now, the same goes for regular savings. So, that's what I'm saying, that, the lack of a good transactions bank account was something that we realized. And now, have been working on for a long time. And now I'm, happy to say that we have finally launched a very high quality neobank account called Kai Cash, which actually solves this problem, because we realize that there is this problem with at least 70 to 80% of customers. And therefore, there is a need to replace that current bank account with a much better, friendlier bank account with no charges, no inhibitions, no unknowns. And therefore, this will promote digitalization. That's one. I think the second big issue, of course, I think a lot of fintechs, including us, faced was just the pandemic years
yeah,
were very, very hard for our customers. Their incomes got hit, and in some sense, they needed emergency credit lines, they needed working capital lines in order to come back. to business, right? And at this point, we realized that our financial health assessment capability could actually be tweaked to become sort of a risk management tool, which could be used for underwriting or for risk management. It's called Chi-Score. And, that was sort of the birth of our risk management and credit product, which eventually did do very well. We did almost sort of, $1 billion of volumes through that product. But that lack of an underwriting framework for giving, let's say, that 6-month loan, 12-month loan for the customer to tide the business over was, really, really sharply felt at this time. And, and I feel like as an industry, completely agree, there's miles to go before we sleep, right? We're talking about 600 million customers here. We are at 2 million. So a lot more to do. We need a lot more players. Actually, we need a lot more competition rather than less, I feel, because, this is an urgent need.
Manish, what are some of the challenges that you faced while you were scaling up Flexiloans?
The first challenge was the same piece that Sucharita has been harping on, is the fact that most people have bank accounts, but the bank accounts don't reflect the quality of the real businesses.
Right.
So even today, a significant majority of the customers, like one, don't have the Aadhaar card, Udhyam Aadhaar, or the GST registration, but don't even have a current account. So the fact that they only have savings account, they can only make the limitations of savings accounts are not even known to them. They can't make more than 5 transactions a day, for example. They get charges on that statement, which means that the bank statement is so thin that you can't assess, but the guy actually makes money. Now, when we speak to them, meet them, these customers, just understand them, they say, hey, you can assess me. But digitally, you can't go to the last mile and assess something which is not available, right? So,
Right.
part one, the bank statements or anything, this was not available. The second piece was always that we, as I mentioned to you, we get 1.5 lakh applications, but once they applied, them converting into actually leads that can actually be assessed by the credit teams became very thin through that door, because the customers would reach out, click up, but then not pick up the call. Or if they pick up the calls, they could not fulfill the documentations, could not understand the process, may not have had bank accounts. So many of them have bank accounts in cooperative banks, right? So they until very recently, most banks did not have PDFs. So they would, even a State Bank of India or Bank of Baroda, Ludhiana, would give PDFs which are not parsable, and thus the entire journey is fraught with risk, not parsing data, and lack of efficiency. So those are the pieces that we face, and thus came, I think, each year some of these issues being faced. We've said, what do? You find out surrogate data. So our first partnerships were with e-commerce platforms or POS players, and we kind of got surrogate data of how they sell. So if they're using a POS machine, we don't need a savings account because we know broadly what kind of estimated business could be. And of late, the UPI transaction apps are a great surrogate to seeing what business is happening, right? People
Right.
can use varying from 10 to 40%. So using partnering with some of these guys, trying to include this base of customers now who are merchants, who are using a small to a very large part of the business via UPI because of the efficiency that UPI has brought to the system, and find a differentiated way to underwrite them with a different scoring. The other piece came about documentation. Can you kind of reduce the documentation? The sole aim was that the customer who is a 10 lakh, 20 lakh, or 50 lakh customer cannot, and the customer who's about 2, 3, 5 lakh rupees customer can't have the same set of documentation underwriting. So we kind of trim down to documentation to the bare minimum, and are also innovating in various means to say, hey, can we kind of go document free? The third thing is communication, as I mentioned. So we've been doing all to do vernacular communications, communication to write blogs about how can people upload their Udyam Aadhaar, how can they update their Udyam Aadhaar, why GST is beneficial, why interest here is beneficial because they get formal taxes, right? Most people are actually used to buying or getting loans from their friends at 1.5%, 2%, or money lenders at 4%. They don't realize that that can't even have tax benefits. Where a loan here at 18% will have a 30% tax benefits of MSMEs. So awareness was an issue. Most people did not know, but when they came to know about it, they felt better. And so our aim is to kind of increase the awareness amongst MSMEs of the benefits of taking a loan here from formal sources. So those are three broad things that we've faced and have done something about.
As a parting thought, Manish, starting with you, what do you think the impact will be on the next 100 million customers if we get our financial inclusion story right?
So I have a very basic example in MSMEs. MSMEs, any funding that goes to an MSME
Mhm.
goes to actually creating growth of a business. And one of the first discussions that we had as founders, I had worked with microfinance companies between 2010 and 13 as a part of my Aditya Birla Group stint. And I
Mhm.
said, एक टमाटर वाला is selling about 100 tomatoes and worth 100 rupees each. So he's basically just needing 10,000 rupees of funding on a day. At
Right.
the end of the day, if he is able to sell those 100 kgs of tomato of 10,000 bucks, even at 10% margin, which is bare minimum, he's creating
Mhm.
100,000 rupees of income for himself, which if you kind of cumulate, it's about 30,000 rupees over a 30-day period. So 10,000 rupee loan can actually create 30,000 rupees of income, which is 300% per month. Now, if you extrapolate to a yearly number, that's 3,600%. And actually, the interest that's being charged by financial institutions, even when they are actually risk pricing these thin files, could be about 24, 25 per annum. So there is a huge potential that MSMEs identify in the entire process now when they get such funding. When they get a funding at 2% per month, they
Mhm.
know that every business opportunity that they can will always yield much, much, much more than that. So, as India and a large part of India is very young now, and
Right.
a large part of India is actually becoming independent and finding nano opportunities, new opportunities in the EV space, the mobile recharge stations, the food space, and so on and so forth. So, our belief is when an India comes forward, including the new formal India, which is the D2C brands and others, when they need funding, their first port of call, because of their lack of history, lack of urgency of speed to kind of access transparency requirements, would be the fintech and digital means, because they will have visibility at tap, they will have access at tap, and transparency at tap. So my sense is, I was reading a Bain statistic recently which said that Brazil, with similar demographics, reached from 2% financial inclusion in 2017 to about 35% in 22. India's number right now is about 7%, and their estimate is by 26 it will be at least 15% of Indian financial services would be catered by fintechs. So, if you look at this penetration, my belief is at least about 20 to 25% market share of most financial services would be taken by the fintechs in the next 5 to 7 years.
Sucharita, your views?
Yeah, so completely agree with Manish on just these businesses adding so much value that that's why the moneylender loans also make sense, right? Because
Mhm.
customers, businesses, they're all rational and they're doing it because still creates value, and therefore so much we can do. One of the things that we like to track is just life goals of customers. So this could be growth of a business, this could be education of the kids, it could be improvement of your house, different things, right, for different people. And this is also fairly universal, right? You and I also have goals like this one. These are human aspirations. And if you think about it, the sustainable development goals that are set out by the UN and that all the countries in the world have agreed to push as a common agenda. If you look at some of those items like decent work, gender equality, these are very much coming from what I like to call these micro SDGs, right? If only every person has to achieve their version of the SDG to for us as a country to achieve the big numbers. I think that's something that we at Kaleidofin find incredibly motivating, that we can improve the journey towards the goals. We can improve that resilience, we can improve that financial health, so that both the goal is achieved as well as the journey is better. I feel like the journey is as important as the goal, right? Because it matters
Yeah.
how you got to that goal. Like Manish is saying, dhakke maar ke bhi, you can achieve goals. and by losing a lot and taking a lot of cost. But if you didn't have to do that, that would be really good. My sense is that India is very well positioned to do this. A lot of infrastructure is in place. I think RBI is hugely pushing all financial institutions to look at this customer segment, including the large ones, very seriously. And I do think that a lot of partnerships will happen for this reason, and therefore, quite excited about the impact that I'm sure we'll all create together.
Thanks a ton for joining us today, Sucharita and Manish. It was a pleasure hosting you on the show.
Thank you, Andrew and Hemant.
Thank you, Elroy and Hemant. Really enjoyed speaking to you.
In case any of our listeners wanted to get in touch with you for more information, what's the best way to do this?
I can be reached on my email ID manish@flexiloans.com.
I can be reached on Sucharita at Kaleidofin.com. That's spelt as Sucharita.
Excellent. We'll include these details in the show notes. Thanks once again for coming on the show and spending time with us.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Sucharita.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Manish. Thanks, Hemant and Elroy.
That's it from India FinTech Diaries this week. In case you haven't already registered, please do sign up for the DLAI Fintech Conclave 2023. The event is on 24th of Jan at Taj Lansing, Mumbai, and brings together digital lenders, tech firms, government officials, banks, NBFCs, investors, and various startups to celebrate the industry as well as plan for the year ahead. With an insight-packed schedule, the conclave is an excellent forum to understand the role of fintech in mobilizing the economy. So do attend. And until next time, stay safe.